Hello and welcome to the Cash Game Locks podcast. I'm Big Italy 42. He is Spencer Limbach at Spencer_JL. And you prepared a couple cash game lineups here, give people a good idea of who to target, some nice high floor players with a little bit of upside as well for both FanDuel and DraftKings. So we'll go ahead and just run down each one. Starting at quarterback on the FanDuel one, as you see here in the article, you've got Matt Ryan here. So why don't you, in case people don't know why Matt Ryan's a good play, why don't you let them know?
Yeah, obviously this is the highest over/under on week one against Philadelphia, who's been one of the worst at allowing fantasy points to quarterbacks last season. They run that fast pace, so more possessions there overall. And then, aside from Matt Ryan, I also have Tony Romo, Sam Bradford, and maybe Ryan Tannehill has viable cash game options. Sam Bradford, if you need some savings from that same game, he's only 7,500, so you can save about 1,000, 1,300 there, and then upgrade as you want elsewhere. So I don't think that's a bad strategy either. But I was able to fit Matt Ryan into this cash game lineup and get all the other pieces that I wanted. So I went ahead and went that route. As I think, the Falcons are underdogs, home underdogs, the rare home underdog in this matchup. So I think they might be trying to play catch up here. So I like Ryan in this spot if you can grab him.
Yeah, and that's a great point there. Running back, this is going to be a popular play. High floor, high ceiling. Eddie Lacy. Not a whole lot of analysis necessary on this one. I mean, this is quite possibly the worst defense in all of football. They were among the worst last season. Eddie Lacy, a big factor in the passing game and the running game, especially with Jordy Nelson out. So, I mean, this one's an obvious play. Everyone should know that Eddie Lacy is going to be probably the most popular running back this week.
Yeah, and he was the first guy I clicked in, 8,500. That's actually cheaper than guys like Adrian Peterson and whatnot. So that's a pretty easy pick there. Green Bay's favored by 7. Should get plenty of touches in the red zone, plenty of touches in the second half, trying to milk the clock. And Chicago ranked 22nd in defending the run last season, and I'm expecting them to actually be worse this year because they lost a couple D tackles. One of them suspended. They lost another free agency. So, I mean, they could be even worse this season. Everything just points to Lacy in this matchup, and I think if you don't have him in your cash game lineups, that's probably going to be a problem. I'll be having him in all my cash game lineups on Sunday, and then I'll be going through all the head-to-heads I have and give a little fist bump for all the guys who don't have him because they'll probably be behind the 8 ball.
Yeah, call-outs on Twitter are in order for everyone who does not play Eddie Lacy in their cash games because you lose if you do not play Eddie Lacy. Yep. Chris Ivory, the next one, guy that I know you're high on, I'm high on as well. He's cheap. He's going to get a ton of volume. They've been talking about how he's going to be a big part of this offense. And obviously, no Geno Smith. You've got Ryan Fitzpatrick under center here, and you have some options on the outside, but Brandon Marshall probably going to be covered by Joe Hayden most of the game, so it's going to be a tough matchup for him. I imagine they're going to be relying on Ivory a lot, and at $6,400, it makes a lot of sense here.
Yeah, I think the Jets will be running the ball quite a bit this game, and it makes sense. Cleveland was dead last in total yardage allowed on the ground last season. So pretty soft competition there. The Jets are expected to win this game, so maybe milking the clock in the second half. You have favorable game flow for Ivory. And there's not much competition there for touches anymore. Chris Johnson's out of there, so they don't have him siphoning carries off. Ivory's the goal line back. He's only 6,400. So, and one more thing, they have a new offensive coordinator there, Chan Gailey, who kind of likes to get his running backs involved in the passing game. So maybe he catches a few more passes than usual. All this just sets up well for a nice, safe, high floor, high ceiling running back 2 play. So I like him in there, and I feel pretty confident in that pick.
Yeah, and rightfully so. Next up, you got some wide receivers here. First one you've got in here is Julio Jones. Already kind of touched on this one. Highest total on the week. And, it's the best wide receiver in that game, and it's not even close. At $9,000, you got to imagine. Home underdog, you mentioned. And, of course, pairing your quarterback with an elite wide receiver, always a good strategy as well. So Julio Jones, going to be a popular play, but kind of hard to get away from him, especially if you're playing Matt Ryan at quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, and he's probably in one of the best matchups of anyone this week, too, against that Philadelphia secondary in a game where Atlanta's going to have to be throwing it a lot. So I mean, it just all makes sense to put him in a cash game and not really overthink it by going to anyone else. So I really like Julio Jones in that spot. And then my second wide receiver spot, Jordan Matthews. I like him as well in that same game. He's obviously the number one wide receiver in Philadelphia now. We saw him put up some monster stat lines in the second half of last year, even though he was the second, third, or fourth option in that offense. So now he's the go-to wide receiver, that up-tempo, high-octane Chip Kelly scheme that is actually the highest projected scoring team of the week. So Matthews, another guy who will probably be highly owned, but I'm not overthinking that one in cash games either.
Yeah, that one makes a lot of sense there. And of course, Devontae Adams. I mean, it's just like you said. Devontae Adams is the guy you have to play everywhere, no matter what.
Yeah, I'm guessing Devontae Adams will have the highest ownership percentage of any player at any position, and that is rightfully so because, I mean, you all know, stepping in for Jordy Nelson, who's hurt, Randall Cobb's banged up, has Aaron Rodgers throwing to him against a bad secondary, and he's only 5,500. That makes for a fantastic cheap value play at wide receiver on all sites. So Eddie Lacy was the first guy I clicked into my lineup. Devontae Adams was the second guy. And I'm basically building around those two.
Yep, and not a bad third guy to click in your lineup is Greg Olsen. Already saw a lot of volume last year, over 1,000 yards with Cam Newton. Obviously, Kelvin Benjamin out. This is a guy that's got a lot of rapport. He's a good red zone target as well. And, they're going to be relying on him heavily this week without really any wide receiver options of note. So Greg Olsen at $5,900 just makes a lot of sense, too, at your tight end spot.
Yeah, he's probably the safest guy there, too. And Jacksonville wasn't that great against tight ends last season. So you have game flow, matchup, just sheer volume with the injuries that they have at wide receiver. Everything sets up well in that 5,900 price point. I mean, you can't really argue with that at all. Some other guys I was looking at here were Martellus Bennett and Jordan Reed. Bennett's a little more expensive, but Chicago, they're going to have to be playing from behind likely against Green Bay. And they also have some injuries at wide receiver. Alshon Jeffrey is expected to play. We're not sure how effective he'll be, so maybe they need Bennett to step up in the passing game a little more. And also Jordan Reed's actually a little bit cheaper here. He's at $5,000, and Niles Paul and Logan Paulson are out for Washington. They're actually out for the season, so it's going to be Jordan Reed basically monopolizing all those snaps at tight end. And we know that scheme, has the nice little emphasis on tight end, sending them on streaks and some posts down the middle. And Kirk Cousins loves to check down, so I think Reed will get some decent volume here if you need a value play.
Absolutely. Speaking of value plays, your kicker here is a value play. Josh Lambo, he's cheap, he's min salary, and like you mentioned, it's a solid offense, good weather. That's really what you're looking at kicker if you're punting there, and it makes sense to save your money for other positions.
Yeah, and as we saw in the preseason, he was on fire in the preseason, so it doesn't hurt to have a guy, with a lot of momentum, feeling pretty confident. And he has a really strong leg, too, so that's why they chose him over Nick Novak, the incumbent kicker there in San Diego. Ultimately was because Lambo has a stronger leg, so you don't hate all those things. And plus, he fits in this lineup perfectly. I mean, this lineup, I believe, zeroed out, so you can't. I mean, you have to feel pretty good when you zero out a lineup like that.
Yeah.
And Lambo, minimum salary. Yeah, I'm not overthinking that one either.
Yep. And your defense there, it's the Jets against the Cleveland Browns. We know Cleveland Browns, one of the worst defenses, or offenses, I should say, in all football. And the Jets, I mean, it's a solid value. It's a cheap play there and a good matchup against a team that really just doesn't have any weapons on offense.
Yeah, they're at home. They're favored. Cleveland will likely be passing the ball. Who they're going to pass the ball to, I don't know, because they don't really have any playmakers. So you feel good that this is going to be a low-scoring game, one of the lowest over-unders on the board. And, if Cleveland gets into pass-heavy mode, a couple turnovers could be on the way. So that's basically what you're hoping for. You just like a home favorite with a solid defense in an okay matchup. And the Jets check all those boxes, and they're actually pretty cheap on FanDuel. So I don't really hate that play at all. I think that's one of the better value plays at defense.
Agree with you there. Moving over to the DraftKings lineup. I mean, a lot of these guys are already covered here. Sam Bradford, you touched on. He's a really nice value on DraftKings at $6,900. mentioned the high total, things like that. So we'll just skip ahead to the guys we haven't talked about. So obviously Eddie Lacy locked in, Devontae Adams locked in. Doug Martin against Tennessee. Tennessee was one of the worst run defenses all of football last year. Doug Martin is not a whole hell of a lot above minimum salary this week at $4,500. So looks like he's another guy that's going to get some volume.
Yeah, and Tennessee was 30th in run defense last season. Tampa's favored in this spot. They should have a nice little lead, you would think, going against Tennessee, who's just, we don't know what they're going to run out there on offense with a rookie quarterback and just discombobulated everywhere else. We don't know who their running back is. So it's pretty safe to say that Tampa could have a lead in the second half, could be leaning heavily on the run game. Doug Martin looked awesome in the preseason. He looked like his rookie self when he had that breakout season. So I like him in this spot. He's very cheap. He's very easy to fit into a lineup. And 4,500, putting him at your second running back or in the flex spot, I think you'd feel pretty good about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then as we look down a little bit further, Julio Jones, Jordan Matthews, like you mentioned, already in there. Jordan Reed, very cheap.
Jordan Reed is near minimum salary. He's 3,300. And then I was looking at Olsen and Martellus Bennett, those other guys we talked about, and they're about 5,500, upwards of 6K. So, I mean, you're talking about half the price for Jordan Reed. I mean, I think he is the play at tight end on DraftKings, and then save there, upgrade all your other positions, stabilize all your other positions, and feel pretty good about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So hopefully enjoyed this little rundown, give you some ideas of some guys that Spencer's using as well as some other options if you want to go a different route. So find us on Twitter at DF Cafe, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Lots of great content for NFL Week 1 and all the other sports as well at dailyfantasycafe.com.